Hi everyone, Nicholas Buffett here from the Junior Senior School here in Cyprus, back with another Excel tutorial, and this one's all about references. Relative references, absolute references, and mixed references. We're going to learn about what they are, when we use them, and how we use them. So let's get started. I've got an Excel spreadsheet here open, and before we begin I want to talk a little bit about this little green square in the selected cell. This is known as the fill handle. Now we're going to be using this quite a bit today, so it will be a good idea to understand what it does. First off, I'm just going to type the number 1 in here and I'm going to enter that information. If you don't know how to enter data, it will be a good idea if you watch the introduction video first. Now I'm going to select this cell, use the fill handle, click, drag down, and I can see it's filling up the rest of the cells with that number. Nothing special about that. Let's try something else. If I was to put the number 2 in the next cell and then select both cells, now when I take the fill handle and drag down, what it will do, it will carry on, it will identify the pattern, the incrementation of 1, and carry on that pattern for me. Very useful. If we do that, let's say again, and this time I'll put the number 3, we can see it gives us all the odd numbers. And I could do this with other things as well. For example, if I was to type the word Monday, even if I spell it wrong, there you go, it's corrected it for me. When I select Monday, use the fill handle and drag that down, look at that, it gives me the consecutive days of the week and it will repeat them again and again. And I can do this again with dates. For example, the 1st, 2021, if I press enter. Okay. Now, if I was to take this, use the fill handle and drag down, we can see it's going to give me the next date and the next day. So the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd. And if I drag that down, all the way down, it's going to go to the next month and then the next month and just keep going. So a very useful tool, the fill handle. Okay, so let's have a look now at adding a calculation and understanding relative references. So here I've got 2 columns with numbers, some numbers in column B and some numbers in column C. And what I want to do is to multiply these 2 numbers together. So I'm going to go to E3 and I'm going to type equals to. And now I want, instead of typing the numbers, for example, 2 times 2, that would give me the correct answer. But then I'd have to type all of them individually, and then the other problem of course will be, if you've seen the first video, the recalculation won't work. If I change this number to a 3, this calculation is now wrong. So let me just change that back and we'll do it the correct way. I'm going to type equals to, so that basically means E3 equals to the contents of B3 multiplied by the contents of C3, and that will give me the answer 4. Now, I'm going to use the fill handle to click and drag that down. And a little bit of Excel magic there. Excel has understood exactly what I want to do, and you can see it's done the appropriate calculations. For example, 2 times 9 is 18, and 7 times 8 is 56. But how does Excel do that? Well, let's look at this first to understand relative references, and then we can see a little bit and understand about absolute and mixed. So I'm just going to drag this over a bit to give us a bit more space. There we go. Okay, so essentially what happens when Excel uses references. Now when I say references, I mean this. B3 and C3 are both classified as relative references. What does this mean? Relative means it has to be relative to something else. So in E3, so if we take this one here, E3, which is the cell that I'm in, E3, equals to, and it basically says B3 times C3, or the other way around. So yes, B3 times C3. B3 times C3. Now, we said B3 and C3 are both relative references. And what does this mean? It means from E3, how do I get to B3? So where is B3 relative to E3? Well, if we look at E3, B3 is actually 1, 2, 3 cells to the left. So that is the same as E3 equaling 3L, 3 to the left, multiplied by, well, where is C3 relative to E3? Again, from here, it's going to be 1, 2. So C3 from E3 is actually 2 to the left. And that's what Excel understands. It doesn't understand B3 and C3. What it understands is from E3, move 3 spaces left, get what's inside, which is the number 2, that one there, and then multiply that with, from E3, move 2 to the left, and get what's inside there, and multiply them together. So that's the same as 2 times 2, giving us 4. Now, when I copy this down using the fill handle, and I've copied that down here, I've copied it down into E4. Now, what Excel has understood is, it doesn't recognize the B3 times E3. All it understands is, so if we get rid of that, is this. 3 to the left times 2 to the left. So from E4, I need to move 3 to the left, and that's what's being copied. So we'll go from here, 1, 2, 3, and get what's inside. And what's inside is the number 4. And then it's going to multiply that with whatever's in 2 to the left from E4. 1, 2. So that'll be the number 5. So that's the equivalent. So 2 to the left is actually the equivalent of 4 times 5, which equals to 20. Relative to E4. So my starting point for these directions, 3 to the left and 2 to the left, are E4. And so on and so forth. As I copy that down, my starting point now is E5, this one here, and it copies over 3 to the left times 2 to the left. 1, 2, 3. So it's going to take that number and multiply it by 1, 2 to the left, that number, giving me 18. Now this time I want to make some kind of a cost list. So here I'm going to have, let's say, the VAT. And let's say the VAT is 0.2 or 20%. And in this column, E column again, I want to calculate what the VAT is, or what 20% is of this number. Now, that's simple enough. If we were to do it manually, we'll simply do 47 times 0.2. But if we've got thousands of numbers, we want to recruit Excel to do that for us. So the calculation is simple. Equals to, I'm going to click on B3 multiplied by D1. Now, notice B3 and D1, both of these are termed as relative references again. We're going to understand why in just a second. I'm going to press enter, and wow, look at that. If you want to get your calculator and check that out, you probably find it's 9.4. Well, not probably, but for sure. Now I'm going to copy this down just like I did before and expect to see the percentage or 20% of each of the other numbers. But I don't. So let's see why. Let's analyze what we've got here like we did before. So in E3, our formula was equal to B3 multiplied by D1. Now that was the same as going 1, 2, 3 to the left, multiplied by 1 to the left, and 2 up. 1, 2. And again, that was the equivalent of 47 times 0.2, giving me 9.4. Okay, so what we want to have a look at is this part here, the relative references. So from E3, we were directed to go 3 to the left, multiplied by 1 to the left and 2 up. Let's see what happens when we copy that to the next cell down. So when we copy this down to E4, we copied this down to here. That was the same as E4 equals to, and it copied this, 3 to the left, multiplied by 1 to the left, 2 up. So if we go 3 to the left, 1, 2, 3, that will be the number 100, multiplied by 1 to the left and 2 up. 1 to the left and 2 up. And this cell here is empty. That's like a big 0. So our answer is 0. So that's actually correct, that answer, for what it's doing. But what is the problem? Well, the problem is, as I'm copying this down, my directions with reference to where I want the answer, E4 now, are not correct. Well, some of them are, but some of them are not. So let's see where we're going wrong. From E4, if I go 3 to the left, 1, 2, and that one's at 3, this one's correct. 3 to the left, that one's good. Multiplied by 1 to the left and 2 up. 1 to the left, well, that's okay. I want that because I want to be in column D. So the 1 to the left is okay, but the 2 up is not okay because the 2 up is landing me in this cell here. So how do we fix this problem? Well, we can do this in two ways. We're going to look at absolute references first. So what we want to do, we want, instead of here it's saying 1 to the left and 2 up, we want it always to be D1. And that would mean that these formulas here would also change and would look like this. 3 to the left times D1. And I would also have here 3 to the left times D1. And as I keep going down, it will always be 3 to the left multiplied by D1. And that will be correct because for this one, E6, for example, as I copy it down, it will be 3 to the left, 1, 2, 3, taking this number, multiplied by whatever's inside D1. So how do we do that? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to our first calculation, this one here, which is B3 times D1. The B3 I want to leave alone because it's a relative reference and I want it to copy downwards. The D1 though I want fixed. Now to do this, I'm going to press on my keyboard this button here, the button F4, the function button F4. At the top of your keyboard you've got some function buttons. Now by pressing the F4 button you get what's known as a toggle switch. So I'm going to first select the cell reference or the relative reference I want to make absolute. I don't want it to change. I can either select the whole reference of the cell or just click anywhere within that cell reference. And when I press F4 one time, then it will change the reference of that cell to $D, $1. Now you can type these manually. You can do this. It's just very time consuming going here and then just simply typing in the dollar signs one by one. Okay, so it's exactly the same thing. What this basically means is as you copy down using the fill handle, this is not a relative reference. It's not going to go to the directions relative to where we want the answer. It's always going to use D1 no matter what. I'm going to press enter now, go back to my first one again and copy this down. And now you can see our functions are correct. And if we have a look, if I select this one and click in the formula bar, we can see it's B5. So that changed, the B5 changed from B3 and multiplied by D1. So the D1 is not changing, doesn't matter how far down we copy. That's known as an absolute reference. Well, essentially an absolute reference, when we have this, in this case, our absolute reference is D1. So this here is known as, that there is a relative reference. That's relative. And basically means the column letter and the row number can change. Remember, as we copied this down, the column letter wasn't changing. It was becoming from D1, it was becoming D2, D3, D4, D5, because it was 1 to the left and 2 up. So essentially, I didn't really need to put the dollar sign before the D. What we did though, we put $D, $1. That basically means that as I copy down, the column letter cannot change and the row number cannot change. This made this what's known as an absolute. That's an absolute reference. So what is a mixed reference? Well, let's have a look and see what the mixed reference is. Mixed references, we have two. The D1 can be written like this. $D1 or $1. These two are known as mixed references. This one here means that the column letter cannot change, but the row number can. In this one, the column letter can change, but the row number cannot. So could we use a mixed reference here instead of an absolute? Well, we could, but which one would work? Well, let's have a look. If I go here and click anywhere in this reference, if I press the F4 button again, and I keep pressing the F4 button repeatedly, it toggles between the four states: relative, absolute, and the two mixed. So that one's mixed, mixed, relative, absolute. We've looked at the absolute, let's understand the mix. So in this case, when it was relative, if I copy that down, and we were getting the wrong answers because D1 was becoming D2. As I copied that down to here, it became D2. And as I copied it down, D2 became D3. Okay? So the column letter is not changing. It's not changing because I'm copying downwards. If I was copying across from left to right, then the column letter would be changing, but the row number would stay the same. So in this case, I could use, instead of the absolute reference, I could use this mixed reference here, which will lock, actually, not that one, this one here. This one would allow the column letter to change, which it doesn't anyway, but it will not allow the row number to change. So if I go here, click in here, select D1 and make this now a mixed reference, but making sure that the row number is locked, that one, $1, that will give me the same results. So if I copy that down, that works. Because if we look here, the number 1, the row number is not allowed to change. If I was to use the other mixed reference, however, here, $D1, that basically means that as I copy down, the column letter cannot change, but the row number can. And that will give me the same result as before. Because as I go from here, 2 to the left, 1 to the left, I'm in column D anyway, but the row number can still change and go 2 up, giving me this one. Okay, so that's mixed references. So I'm just going to give you one more example of the other mixed reference going the other direction now, going from left to right. Usually you would only need the relative or absolute. In certain cases when you want to copy down and across, then absolute is fine. If you want to copy downwards, you want to lock the row number. If you want to copy across, you want to lock the column letter. So I'm going to show you another one example, and that'll be it for this tutorial. Okay, so here we have another spreadsheet, and this time we can see our spreadsheet goes horizontally. So in this case, I want to add a bonus to these grades here. The bonus is going to be what is outlined in B1. So I'm going to click in B4. I'm going to put equals, so that's B4 equals to whatever's inside B3 plus, we'll do an addition this time, whatever's inside B1. And I press enter. Now, with addition and subtraction, it's actually more dangerous, not safer, than using multiplication and division. Because when your relative references move to blank cells in a multiplication or division, you're going to get the value 0, and that automatically looks wrong. Whereas with addition and subtraction, what you're going to get is something like this. So if you've got thousands of numbers, you're getting a result and you probably think it's working. But if we look here, we're not actually adding the bonus. So this is 13, it should actually add that bonus there, 10, and that should be 23, but it's not. The reason why, well, just like before, we can see that is equals to C3 plus C1. So essentially this function here, which was, or is, B3 plus B1, is this. So if we go to draw, so we've got B4 equals to B3 plus B1. Now then, if we look at the directions for that, that is actually 1 up plus 3 up. So it's B3 from B4. With reference to B4, we go up 1 for B3 and up 3 for B1. Okay, so if we do that, that is actually 1 up plus 3 up. Once we copy that over here, with reference to C4, because now we're working in C4, that one there, 1 up plus 3 up. Well, 1 up is okay. Okay, we want that one to change. Plus 3 up. And that's 0. So essentially we're getting 13 plus 0, which is 13. So in this case, if we're going to use absolute or mixed references, let's get rid of all that. So here, in this first function, it's B3 plus B1. As I use the fill handle to come over here, because I'm moving across instead of B3, it becomes C3, because from here, relative 1 up goes to C3. So now instead of the row number changing, the column letter is changing. So if we look at this one, so that's changed from B3 to C3, that's okay. And we want that to happen, but then it goes plus C1, and that's the 1, 2, 3 up. C1 is wrong. The row number's correct, but the column letter is wrong. We want B1. Okay, we want it to multiply by B1. So essentially we want to do this. From here, we want, the original formula is B4 equals to B3 plus B1. As I copy this across, it becomes C3 plus, instead of B1, it becomes C1. Now, in this formula, the C3 is correct, the C is correct, and the 3 is correct, because I want it to go to this one here when I'm in this cell. But the C1, the C is correct, but the C is wrong, but the 1 is correct. You see, we're in row 1, and that's correct because we want to be in row 1, but the C is wrong. I want it to be B. So I've got two options. I can either write this like this, C3 plus $sign B1, or I could write it as C3 plus $sign B, $sign 1. Both of these would work if I was to put this in the first formula. Why? Because in this one, the B will not be allowed to change to a C, because that's where the problem is. This B can't change to a C. This one would also work because it's also locking the B and it can't change to the C. So if we go back and do this, so if I press F4 once, that's an absolute reference. Press enter. Now I use this to drag over, and that would work. You see that? Because it's using B1 as an absolute reference. So if I click in here, there it is. It's C3 plus B1. If I use this one, it's E3 plus B1. So the B1 stays absolute. I can also use, we said, this version as well. So I could press F4 again. This will lock the row number, but not the column letter. This one won't work because as I go along, the B here will be allowed to change. And I don't want the B to change to C. So I'm going to press F4 again, and this one will lock the column letter, but the row number can change. Well, the row number doesn't change anyway, so if I drag that over, that one also works. So that's relative, absolute, and mixed references. The two that you'll probably need the most is going to be relative and absolute. I hope you learned something, and if you did, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and look out for the next Excel tutorial. See you soon.